Welcome to Biblical Chatter. I am sure you know about Joseph and his technicolor coat, but what about his father Jacob? Now Jacob was the son of Isaac, and he had one fascinating life, filled with many wives, rivalry, switcheroos, and deal-making. Not to mention being the only man who wrestled with God. But today, we are delving into the interesting twist of Jacob's sister wives. Yes, polygamy. This is not TLC with Cody, Robin, and their latest drama. However, it does contain jealousy, treachery, and of course baby-making drama-rama. All of this resulted in our boy Joseph thrown into a pit and sold to nasty slave traders. First, we need context of who Jacob was, how he grew into the man he became. Plus also, what is polygamy and why it is not common now. Polygamy is the practice of having multiple spouses. This subject has a fascinating history that has captivated people throughout the ages. From ancient civilizations to modern societies, the concept of having multiple partners has appeared across the world and has been both celebrated and vilified. It is the majority of men having more than one wife. One of the most famous men in history is King Solomon with 700 wives plus 300 concubines. Now that is a full calendar of date nights. In ancient biblical times, polygamy was common among the wealthy, kings, and anyone who wanted to, but the bottom line was, you had to be able to afford to keep your wives and children. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were known to have many wives, but to also marry their siblings and other relatives to keep the royal bloodline pure. Polygamy was a way to establish political alliances. In ancient China, wealthy men would often have multiple wives to form alliances with other powerful families. Then we have some Native American tribes where polygamy was practiced as a way to unite different clans and tribes. However, polygamy has proven to be a source of controversy and conflict in many societies. In modern times, we live in a monogamy society. Then you have the money side of things. It's expensive enough to have one wife and 3 kids, let alone a Playboy mansion full of wives. Okay, back to the Bible, when polygamy was a way of life and accepted. We are at the start of the Bible. In Genesis, we see Jacob born a twin to Isaac, son of Abraham and mother Rebekah. When his older and apparently very hairy brother Esau popped out just before him, Jacob's little baby hand was wrapped firmly around Esau's ankle. If that was not a symbol for sibling rivalry, I don't know what is. The two brothers grew up. All the while, Jacob knew that Esau, being the firstborn, would inherit the blessing from his father Isaac. This involved all lands, women, slaves, animals, and of course wine. You name it, the firstborn had it all. Not to say parents love one kid more or less, but we had a situation here. Truth be told, Rebekah loved Jacob more as he hung around home helping her. And on the other hand, Esau was in turn loved by Isaac as he was just like his father, wild, free, roaming the land and hunting game. But Jacob all the while knew exactly how important it was to be the firstborn. After cooking a master chef meal, Jacob would ask Esau to give up his birthright in trade for the hearty meal. In that moment, Esau was starving like the rock about to start his cheat day. So what did he do? He simply agreed to the terms with little regard to his lineage and ate. But the bigger problem was when Esau at 40 married 2 Hittite women, Judith and Basemath. And according to Genesis 26 verse 35, they were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So Esau did this behind his parents' back. He married outside of the Abrahamic lineage, which brought great pain to his parents. Not something the firstborn should really do. However, reading between the lines, there must have been some drama around the nightly dinner table. Isaac and Rebekah seemed to be having issues with each other. However, Jacob was in the background, just doing what he always did. That was until his mother heard Isaac say to Esau, "Go hunt some game, come back and receive the family blessing." Right then, Rebekah set in motion the plan for Jacob to take his brother's birthright. With a goatskin wrapped around his arms and neck, to imitate the hairiness of Esau, wearing his brother's clothing, Jacob and his mama pulled a switcheroo on the blind aging Isaac and got the blessing. Esau, of course, was livid and vowed to kill Jacob for this. However, Isaac would go on to bless Jacob again and send him off to live with Rebekah's family for his own safety. Right, it's now on to the sister wives part. Thanks for hanging on until now. An extra 20 points if you did? So arriving at his uncle's house, he is greeted, and in that slow-motion movie moment, he meets a woman named Rachel. Turns out she is the daughter of his uncle Laban. Yes, you are right, this does make them cousins. However, this is biblical times, so moving on, we are pretty sure Rachel was very attractive. As Jacob kissed her right away, and not long after that, he declared his desire to marry her. Jacob would go on to agree to work 7 years for her father Laban if he could marry Rachel. Now, Rachel had an older sister, Leah, who will enter the situation soon. So back to Rachel, and her father Laban said, sure, you can marry her, and boy did time fly. Not to mention Laban benefiting financially from a blessed Jacob. Now Jacob, the old-school romantic that he was, declared it had only felt like days had passed, not the entire 7 years. So it was finally time to marry. They sent out the invites, got the animals, and filled the wine barrels. However, Laban was about to do a switcheroo on Jacob. On the wedding night, after a big meal and celebration, he dressed up his other older daughter, Leah, who, side note, was nowhere near as attractive as Rachel. Anyway, Laban sent her into the darkened marriage room, where after a night of food, wine, and anticipation, you can only imagine how ready Jacob was for this night. Imagine Jacob laying in the dark, thinking he finally got to have his Rachel after 7 years, and in the end, it's not even her. I mean, did Leah not say anything all night? Anyway, Jacob was horrified in the morning and confronted Laban about the deception. Like any savvy character, he simply replied in a nonchalant way. Genesis 29, verse 26, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." Wow. Laban, you didn't think to share that information with Jacob at any point in the previous 7 years. Can you imagine the room right then? You would have heard a pin drop. Okay, here's the kicker. Laban then goes on to tell Jacob, well, look, if you really want Rachel, let's just wrap up this wedding week with Leah. And if you work another 7 years, then you can take Rachel now as well. Of course, Jacob would agree, and Laban knew this. Laban also gave Bilhah his servant to Rachel and Jacob, plus Leah's servant Zilpah. So after deceiving his own father Isaac for Esau's birthright, he himself was deceived by his mother's brother in a similar ruse. Makes you wonder what else those siblings got up to. Moving on, and after marriage comes the all-important children, and in ancient biblical times when life was very different, having a lot of children was needed to continue the family line. This sets the stage for the real housewives of Canaan. To start with, Leah was overshadowed by her sister, just like Kim Kardashian does to all her sisters. Plus, Leah was openly shunned by Jacob for all to see. He was still absolutely smitten by Rachel. This resulted in Leah living a life, constantly feeling unloved and insecure. So much so that God saw her pain, that Leah was hated. Yes, the word hated was used in the Bible in reference to Leah. So in light of this, God opened her womb and gave her children. She produced 4 boys, and with each one hoping that Jacob's affections would turn to her. However, they did not. But Leah made sure they all understood the situation, with the naming of her children. Her first son, Reuben, see, a son. Her next one, Simeon, God heard that I am unloved. The third one, Levi, now my husband will be with me. And the fourth one, Judah, thanks. All the while, his other wife, Rachel, was seething in anger that she has not had a baby yet. One time, the arguments got out of hand, and she raged at Jacob. Genesis 30, verse 1-3. She said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I shall die." Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Jacob must be so frustrated as well, because you can bet he was waiting for the day that his beloved Rachel would finally have a baby. But right now, there are no kids running around or babies crying anywhere near Rachel. Taking matters into her own hands, she then decides to give Jacob, Bilhah her servant, as this was done in biblical times. What do you know, fertile Jacob got her pregnant with a son. Then round 2, and Bilhah has another son. Rachel, of course, claimed these boys as her own and raised them on their side of the camp. Step in, wife number 1, Leah, and she is now really annoyed. Until now, Leah had been the only mother. So she ups the ante and gives Jacob Zilpah her servant. Again, Jacob's target is true, and she also goes on to have 2 sons. Right now, the baby count is at 8 kids for Jacob. The tension in the camp must have been palpable. One day, it ran at an all-time high. During an afternoon, while the men were working the harvest, Rachel asks one of Leah's sons for some mandrakes. He had found them in the field, and may have bought them back for his mother, Leah, as she was having trouble conceiving. She snipes back at Rachel, Genesis 30, verse 15. "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" The two sister wives go on to make a deal. In exchange for mandrakes, Leah can have Jacob for the night. Talk about rent a husband. Well, it was not too long until Jacob found out his dinner plans. As he was returning from a hard day in the fields, Leah stopped him and said, "You are mine for that night thanks to a mandrake deal I made with Rachel." Well, the candles were lit and Leah got pregnant again and would go on to have another 2 sons. Still, all the while she is waiting for Jacob's soft, gentle affection, which would never come her way. In her final childbearing act, Leah gave birth to a little girl named Dinah. Meanwhile, Rachel is still childless. Now, after watching Leah and the maids all bear Jacob's children must have been heart-wrenching and enraging. She, after all, was the favorite wife, but without a child. By the end, when Leah had Dinah, God showed his favor on Rachel, and she became pregnant with a son, Joseph. By this stage, Jacob is getting on in life, and this young boy soon grows up to become Jacob's favorite child. Not only would Jacob favor Rachel and Joseph above all else in his family, he would actively show it to the world, and none more so apparent when he had to return home and see his brother Esau again, the same brother whom he had cheated out of his birthright all those years ago. How would he respond? Would Esau exact revenge after all these years? Well, on the way, Jacob had a plan and divided up his family. Even though they all departed together, Leah was still not on the same level of care and respect as Rachel. Jacob had arranged his family so that the maids Bilhah and Zilpah, plus their children, were placed first in the procession line. Then he had Leah and her children, and last and most protected, Rachel and Joseph at the rear. His beloved wife Rachel would later die in childbirth, having Jacob's final child Benjamin. But Joseph, until the age of 17, was Jacob's favorite. That was until the jealousy consumed his brothers, and they threw him in a pit, sold him, and claimed to their father Joseph had died. There is so much more to the life of Jacob, the way he did business and got ahead in the world. His complex relationship with his wives was only one part. Please comment if you would like to continue with these fascinating biblical stories.